Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Welcome to the Association of Jewish Libraries' second annual membership gala. My name is Kathy Bloomfield, and I'm the president of this wonderful international organization. It is so fantastic to be here with all of you today. I want to thank our new members for joining AJL and say welcome. And I want to thank you, all of our current members, for renewing your membership with us. It's so good to be here with you. We're so happy to have you all as part of AJL, the leading authority on Judaic librarianship, and we promise that you are in for a unique and exciting year. Before I kick off our amazing program this morning, I have a couple of announcements. First, I want to give a special thank you to our major donors, Harry Chan, Eric Chaim Klein, Joe Taylor Marshall, and Dan Wyman. Their support enables us to offer programming like this, as well as ensuring that we can give our AJL awards for astounding merit in Jewish writing. Thank you to each of you for your continued support of AJL. So now a few announcements. I want to make you all aware, excuse me, that's my dog. I want to make you all aware that AJL's Fall 2021 Author Showcase will take place on Tuesday, November 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. The focus will be on picture books, middle grade and young adult authors who did not present at our digital conference in 2021. You must be an AJL member to be eligible to present. Titles presented must be copyrighted 2021 or 2022. Each participating author will have 3 minutes to present their book, and we will notify you by the end of October if you're accepted for the showcase. There's going to be more information. For more information, please ask Ellen Drucker-Albert, whose email will be in the chat momentarily, along with the form you need to fill out to apply. I also want to announce that AJL has a new podcast, Nice Jewish Books, which covers adult fiction. The first episode is out now, and it's an interview with Mary Marks, who writes cozy quilting mysteries. The link will be in the chat as well. I want to remind you that you need to save the dates, June 27th to the 30th, 2022, for our annual conference, which will be live and in person in Philadelphia. Following our program today, please hang around to participate in a breakout room so that we can all have the opportunity to chat with one another about all that we learned this morning, afternoon, and evening. Now I want to introduce Jerry Krautman, our outstanding development consultant, who's going to share one of our premier projects, the Donna and Richard Harris Jewish Archives and Collections Around the World. Jerry?
Thank you very much, Kathy. I'm going to show you what we've been working on. I'm going to show you 2 pages this morning. For this page, I've been working with Heidi Warnick from the Eitz Chaim Library in Amsterdam. And so far, this is what we've got going so far. This is going to be, the project is going to host libraries and from day schools, universities from all around the world, and this is our 2 premier pages. And if you find this interesting and want to be part of us, we would love to have you. I want a big shout out to Heidi, excuse me, for
Jerry, you're muted.
Okay, was I muted the whole time?
No, just by after you shouted out to Heidi.
Okay, hi Heidi. Okay, and then we're working on this together. It's a collaborative project, and I'm enjoying it very much. And I know, hope she is as well. So this is her page, and then I'm going to show you Heidi Rabinowitz. This is a different Heidi. This is the Feldman Children's Library in Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. This is working together with Heidi, who also has a very strong educational and graphic background, which came in very handy in putting together a page. And this is what we're working with her. You can see they have 2 different looks, but they're going to be this, and along with Heidi's page, will be hopefully amongst the hundreds of libraries that we'll be hosting in the future. So if this is an interest to you and you'd like to be involved, we'd love to have you contact our leadership, and we'll be happy to chat with you about it. There's Heidi right there. Hi, Heidi. All right, thank you very much. I'm now going to stop sharing and go on with the program. Take care.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I want to say that the Harris Family Foundation gave us a very significant grant to put that information together. So, and Jerry's been working very hard on it. So thank you. And thank you to all who have participated. I'm so excited about today's program. The Foer family is simply remarkable. And I can't wait to hear more about how this incredibly gifted group of people all came to be in one family, which doesn't seem fair, right? I mean, anyway. So let me introduce you to the moderator for today's event, Rachel Kamen. Rachel has been a synagogue librarian for over 20 years and has worked at North Suburban Synagogue Beth El in Highland Park since 2008, currently serving as the Director of Lifelong Learning. Rachel's articles and book reviews have appeared in numerous publications, and I would advise you all to read her recent chapter from the book, which I'm sure she will remind me it's so outstanding and I can't remember the title, I'm sorry, but it's really good. It's on our website. Have appeared in numerous publications, and she leads book discussions for 5 Chicago area synagogues, as well as for organizations and private groups. A member of the AJL Fiction Award Committee from 2017 to 2021, Rachel currently serves as the AJL's representative on the Sophie Brody Award Committee. She received the 2021 Fanny Goldstein Merit Award in recognition of her loyal and ongoing contributions to AJL and the profession of Jewish librarianship. Rachel will introduce the members of the Foer family who have so graciously come to speak with us today. Take it away, Rachel.
Thank you, Kathy. It is such an honor for me to be moderating this discussion. It's so great to see everyone. So I'm just going to introduce the members of the Foer family, and then we're going to have a little chat, and we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So throughout the presentation, if you want to put questions in the chat, that is great. And we'll kind of monitor that and try to insert them when appropriate. And maybe we'll also have some time at the end if people even want to unmute and ask their questions live. But first, I want to introduce you to this amazing family. Esther Safran was born in Lodz, Poland, and spent her early childhood in a displaced persons camp before moving with her family to the United States in 1949. She worked as press secretary for presidential candidate George McGovern, founded the public relations firm FM Strategic Communications in 2002, and served as the executive director of the Sixth and I Synagogue from 2007 to 2016. In 2008, the Forward recognized Esther as one of its Forward 50. The Washingtonian included her in their 2015 list of the most powerful women in Washington. And in 2020, Esther published her memoir, I Want You to Know We're Still Here, a poignant and deeply moving account of her parents' silence on their Holocaust experience and her visit to the Ukraine in search of her family's stories. I highly recommend it. I recently listened to the audiobook. And actually, Esther, you should have narrated the entire audiobook. I really enjoyed Esther does the beginning and the end, but she should have just done the whole thing. Next time, make them let you be the audiobook narrator. Esther lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Bert, and they are the parents of Franklin, Jonathan, and Joshua, and the grandparents of 6. Albert Foer is the founder and former president of the American Antitrust Institute. Before founding the AAI in 1998, his career included private law practice in DC, the Federal Senior Executive Service, trade association and nonprofit leadership, and teaching antitrust to undergraduate and graduate business school students. He has published numerous articles, book chapters, and reviews, and is the editor of the Next Antitrust Agenda and co-editor of the International Handbook on Private Enforcement of Competition Law and of Private Enforcement of Antitrust Law in the United States. Their oldest son, Franklin Foer, is a staff writer at The Atlantic and former editor of The New Republic. He is the author of How Soccer Explains the World, an Unlikely Theory of Globalization, and the co-editor of Jewish Jocks, which won a National Jewish Book Award in 2012. His latest book, World Without Mind, The Existential Threat of Big Tech, was named a New York Times 100 Notable Books of 2017. Middle son, Jonathan Safran Foer, is the author of the best-selling award-winning novels, Everything is Illuminated, the 2001 National Jewish Book Award winner, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, and Here I Am, and the best-selling works of nonfiction, Eating Animals, and We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast, as well as the New American Haggadah that he co-authored with Nathan Englander. Jonathan received the New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award and was included on Granta's list of Best Young American Novelists, the New Yorker's 20 Under 40 list, and the Forward's Forward 50 list of the 50 most influential Jewish Americans of the year. He teaches creative writing at New York University. Youngest son, Joshua Foer, is the author of Moonwalking with Einstein, an international bestseller published in 34 languages. His writing has appeared in the New Yorker, National Geographic, Esquire, Slate, Outside the New York Times, and other publications. Josh is the co-founder of the online guide to the world's wonders and curiosities, Atlas Obscura, and co-author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Atlas Obscura, an explorer's guide to the world's hidden wonders. He was named one of 10 people who could change the world by the New Statesman. Josh is the co-founder of the nonprofit Safaria, an online open source free content digital library of Jewish texts that I'm sure most people on this Zoom are familiar with. It's an indispensable resource for Judaica librarians and Jewish educators. Josh is also the co-founder of the design competition Sukkah City. And then we also have Sadie Jean Foer, the oldest of Esther and Bert's 6 grandchildren. She is the daughter of Frank. She's a high school student and the self-described family historian. And she is the host of the podcast Rooted History. And maybe later, she also seems to have a great synagogue librarian story that we want to all hear. So we'll hope we'll get a chance for her to share that with us. So welcome all of you. And that introduction could have been like 3 times as long. Like I really had to edit it down because each one of you have such impressive bios. But let's just start by maybe telling us a little bit about your most recent or your current project. And you guys can pick the order, but anyone wants to share something that I didn't include in the bio that you've been working on?
Why don't I start? Because I have the most recent book out. There are lots of others that are in the works.
You're the described matriarch of the family. So.
Right. So after leaving Sixth and I, where I had the opportunity to create a model for young Jewish involvement, I decided it was time to look back at our family story. I had spent most of my life in public relations, public affairs, politics, and then in the Jewish world and trying to build a Jewish future with Sixth and I and the model we created. But I realized it was time to look back. Part of this, I lots of impetus, but one came from Sadie herself when she sat with me in my home office, where I have lots of boxes of pictures labeled by the family unit, the family branch. And Sadie looked at me and said, "How will I know who these people are?" And I realized how right she was, that I knew who I could pull out these boxes and could not only tell you the names, but the stories, but that I needed to leave these stories for Sadie and her cousins and for their children and grandchildren. So that's when I undertook writing this memoir, which is really about my search for my family's history. It was something that each of our sons was involved with in a different way. Jonathan, of course, wrote Everything is Illuminated, which told the family story through fiction. And as a result, people started to call me and tell me all the things he got wrong and the true story. And then Frank, in 2009, Frank and I went to Ukraine to find as much truth as we could find. And then, of course, Josh, as I say in the book, brought the story home with the naming of his 2 children, our youngest 2 grandchildren, who are named for my family, and the youngest, our youngest granddaughter, B, who's named for my half-sister who was killed in the Holocaust. So that was the latest project. There are lots of other projects in the works, but I wanted to share that one.
Yeah. And I will say that, I read Jonathan's book, Everything is Illuminated, back when it came out, and of course saw the movie. And then listening to Esther's book, now it's like, oh, now I need to read Everything is Illuminated again. So just be prepared. If you will especially enjoy Esther's book if you read Everything is Illuminated, but I think you will feel the same as me and want to then go back and revisit Jonathan's novel after reading Esther's story. Anyone else want to share an in the works project or your most recent project that you think would interest our audience?
I'll jump in, as always. What I've been working on lately has been a kind of a memoir, and both a family memoir and an intellectual journey that I've followed over my professional lifetime. I don't know if it'll work together, but this is what I wanted to do. Let me say that our conversation today is spontaneous and utterly unrehearsed, and is the first time that we've all been on a stage together. So the more spontaneity, the better. You want to know why I'm working on a book? It's because every time people see me, they say, "You're the only four that hasn't actually published a book, aren't you?" And the answer is, "Yeah, but I'm working on it."
Great. You got to keep up with them. Yeah, you can't be left out of the club. Jonathan, Josh, or Franklin, new books in the works?
I would just say there's an irony with what my dad just said, which is that he's the actual writer in the family. And he has read more books than probably the rest of us combined, and probably has more natural facility with language than any of us. If the spirit of this conversation is improvisation, I think the spirit of my life, and I think to some extent the same would be true for Frank and Josh, has been improvisation. I don't know that any of us wanted to write books when we were younger. There are things that we cared about an awful lot that books provided ways to care about and to, make a living pursuing. So when you ask that question of what it is that's in the works, if I've been a professional writer for about 20 years now, I've always had an answer to that question, and it's always been the wrong answer. It's turned out to be the wrong answer. I've had a lot of ideas that I thought were good that turned out not to be good. And what ended up serving me instead was the ability to recognize a bad plan and to instead trust my instincts about who I am and what actually interests me, as opposed to what I think ought to interest me. And that's been, I've been very lucky to have that. And it's something that, Jewish culture, as I have experienced it, often emphasizes outcomes and emphasizes, we do this for that reason, whether it's religiously, ritualistically, or culturally, and that can be a great thing, but it can also make it hard to improvise. And I've been grateful for the particular kind of Jewish culture that I've been embedded in, which always said that it was okay to make big changes, sometimes at the last minute.
That was a very elaborate dodge. Like, you managed to speak for 5 minutes about anything not having to do with the question.
But I've made a great living doing just that.
Josh or Frank, anything to add about current or project?
I'll answer the question literally, as opposed to the metaphorical non-answer that you just were treated to. I'm doing a book right now about the first year of the Biden presidency, which it's kind of an insider account. I'm trying to report it, and I have some access to the White House, and I think it's I'm finding it to be kind of in the spirit of improvisation that Jonathan's talking about, because it's the first time that I've started working on a project where I don't actually know what the story is, because the way the story ends shapes the way that the story is told. And I don't know how the story will end yet, but I'm having to do it on a relatively tight timeline. And I think just to echo what Jonathan said, I mean, I think that one of the things that I remember, I never actually thought that I would write a book when I was growing up, and I don't even know, it was probably sometime in my 20s when the idea of writing a book first occurred to me. But part of the reason that I think that I never thought that I would do it was just growing up the way that I think kind of books were treated in our house. They were fairly sacred objects. And I mean, a lot of my memories are we had an attic in our first house growing up that was the library. And it just felt like the shelves were endless, and they were they were meticulously organized by subject. And I don't think that they were organized alphabetically within subject, but they were organized chronologically within subject. And they really were they were very magical objects for me, and but so magical that they almost felt inaccessible, or not something that I'd ever be capable of producing.
You're talking about Our Bodies, Ourselves?
I was more thinking about the I
It's
won't
a wonderful book.
I got that book for my bat mitzvah.
Come on, Josh.
All right. I'm actually in the process of starting 2 new enterprises, which I don't think I've spoken about either of them publicly before, but this seems as good an audience as any to talk about them in front of. One is a film and TV production company that is going to be focused on the Jewish experience. And the idea is we are supposed to be this nation of storytellers. It's supposed to be a national strength. And if there's anything that the last year and more has made apparent, it's that we're doing a manifestly poor job at that, at telling our story. And whether you're talking about Israel or anti-Semitism, or simply how we're going to pass along this Jewish project to the next generation, they're all so fundamentally about storytelling. And so I'm partnering with a guy called Ben Cosgrove, who ran George Clooney and Steven Soderbergh's production company for many years, to launch a new enterprise that will hopefully do a good job leveraging TV and film to tell positive Jewish stories. So that's one project. And then the other project which is relevant to a conversation about libraries, is I am launching a new kind of Jewish communal space in Cambridge and It's actually right on the border of Cambridge and Somerville in Boston, called the Lair House, which is aiming to revive the idea of Franz Rosenzweig's Lair House of the 1920s, 1930s in Germany. And it is basically like a storefront, open, accessible, democratic Beit Midrash that is also going to have great booze and great coffee and great food, and hopefully be a pilot for a new kind of Jewish space that doesn't exist right now, but they could potentially, if it's successful in Boston, end up in other cities as well.
Wow, sounds great. Sadie, do you want to tell us about your podcast?
Sure. Well, it started as a history project, where a sort of open-ended one, where we could really make anything we wanted based off of what we'd learned over the course of the year. And so I thought I would combine my history knowledge from the class with my love of plants to create a podcast that explores history through the lens of a certain plant. So currently there's only one episode, but stay tuned, which is about maize, and it looks at aspects of Latin American history through that lens, which, yeah.
Great. So if people just Google rooted history with your name, will they find it? Oh, somebody put it in the chat. Awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, Heidi put it in the chat for us. Great. So do you think, like, to have so many writers in one family, especially all of you are saying you didn't set out to be a writer, like was it something in the water, or was it, the magic attic? Like, what do you think? What do you think accounts for the fact that you've all entered into this similar profession in very different ways?
I think Jonathan said it. I think it was Jonathan. We're storytellers. And this is very much in the Jewish tradition of telling stories. And we each write in different, or whatever it is we do, not necessarily writing, but we're telling different stories. We're using that medium to talk about things that we care about deeply. None of us are writing in the same, from antitrust to the Biden presidency to food to maize. It's a vehicle for us. It's a powerful vehicle, and it's been a vehicle of the Jewish people. So we're continuing in that beautiful tradition.
So it doesn't surprise you, Esther? Does it surprise you? Does it surprise you?
Yes, absolutely surprised me.
Oh, it does still surprise you. Okay.
It absolutely surprised me. I think we tried to raise a family that with values that cared about the world around them. And I think that's what they have. That's what they are doing. I didn't realize the vehicle was going to be books and movies and podcasts.
Within the family, there was one tradition, which was that my father, their grandfather, wanted to be a newspaper reporter. And that was the one thing he really wanted. And he lost his job during the Depression when he was just a young kid on the beat. He never got a college education. Had to went into the jewelry business, which became his business. But I think the kids were always aware of that. They were also aware of various writers that we knew, like Robert St. John, who used to come to our seders. They also had a lot of, as Jonathan mentioned in that piece of fiction that he told about me being a better writer than those guys. We expect fiction like that from Jonathan. But I lost my train of thought on that, which is just as good. Let somebody else take over.
I think it's
What
interesting.
about-
I just think it's interesting that how little we were pushed in that direction, and some of us were pushed in the opposite direction. That there was like, all of the kind of the tropes of the Jewish mother kind of were like, not all of them. Some of them were present, like the idea that writing is an incredibly, when you begin, it's a very unstable profession. You face lots of rejection. It doesn't necessarily lead you on a path where you're going to be able to set up practice with like guys named Goldstein and Cohen and like, in a medical office building. And so, I think to some extent, the fact that we weren't directly encouraged, or in fact, sometimes, maybe nudged in the other direction, actually was one of the forces that helped create space for us to do this. I think that it really did feel like we were each independently following our own paths into this field.
It's interesting, in a story that probably has not been told very much, Jonathan was accepted to medical school, and he had to tell his Jewish mother, this is not what I think I want to do. I want to write. And I don't know where that will take me. And I don't know whether I'll be able to make a living, but this is my passion. And we understood we had to believe in him, just as we believe in all our children and grandchildren, and help support them in their passions.
And I think that we always recognize creativity as particularly important, and that failure is not necessarily a bad thing at all. And you take risks,
Mhm.
And I think that all of these guys are risk takers, not silly risks, but thought through risks. And they and their work have benefited from that orientation, I believe.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any truth to the rumor that when you guys were growing up, you were required to make presentations during dinner?
So, required, I think that's an overstatement. It started, I think, because Frank was kind of shy.
Well, he couldn't put a sentence together.
Okay, that's terrible. I don't think this is the audience we ought to tell that story to. And we were trying to build his confidence. So
You're
we came
overstating things like
idea.
Jonathan right now. I mean, it's
What?
I said you're engaging this sort of hyperbole that might emerge from Jonathan's mouth.
Right.
So anyway, we came up with this idea of, and it wasn't like a requirement, and everything in our house was kind of loose. I mean, when people will say, so how did this all happen? Nobody was required to read a certain amount of books. We watched TV, we ate junk food. I was a working mom. We just hoped to hold it together. But I think we cared about the right things, and we were trying to encourage confidence, starting with Frank and these conversations, and they could pick any topic they wanted to talk about. And I am not going to mention some of the topics that were talked about at our
Please, just a few.
Oh, no way. It comes from being the mother of sons, the things I had to listen to.
But here's how it worked, just very quickly. About 10 minutes before dinner, we would originally it was Frank, but everybody else wanted to play too. So we would give them a topic and tell
they
them.
could pick the topic.
We would tell them that you've got to start by telling us what you're going to tell us, then you're going to tell it to us, and then you're going to tell us what you told us. Just a way of structuring a little piece of a conversation. And they would go off and they'd come back and sit at the table, and each one couldn't wait to make his little presentation.
And embarrass me.
Yeah, she always thought it was something special to be the mother of boys, and still does.
I don't remember any of that.
I know.
You're the youngest. That's because you're the
Telling
youngest.
that, I'm thinking, well, with you, we were really just trying to hold it together.
You're just lucky that you got dinner, Josh.
Josh came a little later than the others.
What do you read each other's work, like pre-publication, serve as advisors, editors, proofreaders, consultants? Do you guys bounce ideas off of each other, or is the first time you're reading each other's work when it's release day?
Well, I'll start by speaking for myself. I was writing a book after all three of my sons had written successful books, and I was totally intimidated. While I bounced ideas off of them, I don't think they saw what I had written until it was virtually done. And I was nervous about sharing it with them.
But did you share it with them, Esther, before?
Before it was published.
Yeah, so that you could still make changes.
Had gotten something pretty robust together, but I did it timidly and nervously.
How did you react to reading your mom's first book, or the manuscript of her first book?
That's just such a complicated question. For reasons that don't require explaining, like anybody can imagine. I'm sure it's complicated when they read something of ours. It's just complicated. I don't mean that in a bad or good way. It's just filled with cross currents of,
Right.
history and love, and what's it like if a family member is going to make themselves vulnerable publicly? Like, that's scary. So it was definitely not any kind of like dispassionate reading. But I sent something to Josh, 2 days ago. Frank and I talked about ideas for his book a week ago. we all the time talk about stuff, and I can't wait for Sadie to get a little older and hopefully be interested and share stuff with her. That it's a really wonderful way to know somebody, actually, in the same way that reading and writing is a wonderful way to know a stranger. It's a singular way to and by the way, it's a singular way to know yourself as well. It's
that's
exposure to a part of you that has no other outlet.
Yeah. Was there any advice you've given each other that they've taken that you can say, I told you so, you listened to me?
If you had listened to me, you said?
No, like that they did listen to you, or you listened to their suggestions? Any examples?
I would say it's very rare that I don't listen to advice that they give.
Wow.
It's usually just good, and also like they know my own tendencies to indulge in different directions and things that would be appealing to, like, the guitar solo problem of like, it feels great to play and it's terrible to listen to. I think they are good at knowing what I like to do that isn't always great to be the recipient of.
Wow.
So, and just for example, this last week when I shared something with Josh, almost all of his thoughts were maybe end it a little sooner, end that scene a little sooner. You don't have to, the joke doesn't have to go that far, because it's very, it's like a different friend of mine said in a different context. If it feels good, maybe don't do it. This was a context of like emotionally venting about a frustrating situation. But that's often very good advice in writing too.
Anyone have anything else to add about serving as each other's sounding boards or consultants or proofreaders? No? What about, have any of you read any good books lately that you would recommend to this audience, particularly books of Jewish interest or that would interest librarians such as ourselves? Anything we should add to our must-read lists?
Well, Josh and I had that exchange about Jews Don't Count by David Baddiel,
Yeah.
which was really influenced me a lot. I thought it was a wonderful book.
And by the way, I'm reading that book too, and we haven't talked about it.
Great. And I think it's really an interesting read alike along with Dara Horn's book,
Yes.
People Love Dead Jews. I think they're interesting to read together. Other good books, they don't have to be new books, other books that we should all have on our to read list.
I just started reading Geraldine Brooks' books, and have found her to be very excellent. Some Jewish aspects and some not, but really good writer, current writer.
Just recommend specifically a book of hers that I only just read in the last few months, which is The Secret Chord, which is her adaptation of the King David story as told through the prophet Natan. And it's just so wonderful and cinematic and and should really be a TV show or a film.
There you go.
So,
Maybe a future project for your production company.
We could watch it drinking beer and coffee in your
At the
place
warehouse. Yes.
with
yes.
other Jewish people. Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Sounds
There you
good.
go.
Get a couple security guards at the front door. It'll be great.
Franklin or Sadie, any book recommendations?
Sadie, you go first.
Well, I'm trying to think. I'm taking a look at my bookshelf after when you asked that question to try and see what I could find. I don't think I have anything on the top of my head. So
Okay. It doesn't have to be a Jewish book either. But, Sadie, do you want, maybe this is a good time to share what was your grandma was telling us before the program started about your experience with the synagogue library, and maybe do you have any memories of books from that time? Tell us that story.
Well, I used to spend a lot of time at my synagogue library because when I would go to Hebrew school in the middle of the week, I would go early and I would go in the library and spend time there. And there was a period of time where I would be really anxious to go to Hebrew school for just like being there alone was really made me anxious. So the solution I came to is that I would read a book from the library. I'd take it with me, and if I ever got anxious, I would read it. And I ultimately sort of aided on by our wonderful Addis librarian, Robin. She would help me find a great book, and I would, after reading it, write a little book review that was posted on some bulletin board in the library. And I just really enjoyed spending time there and discovering new books. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the books from that you read from the synagogue library?
It's a good question. I remember I was really into the All of a Kind family books. That was a big favorite of mine. That's the only title I can remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I think Robin's on. Maybe she'll put some. She might remember them. Maybe she'll put them in the chat. But there's a wonderful new biography about Sidney Taylor that just came out in June, published by Yale University Press, that you might be interested in. It's kind of a insider's guide to the real story behind Sidney Taylor and those books. Any other Frank, any book recommendations for us?
I'm gonna say I think the last Jewish themed book I finished was the Netanyahus by Joshua Cohen, which I thought was hilarious and problematic, and but like a madcap hilarious portrait of a family, but also just kind of a meditation on the subject, which Jonathan has written about in his last book, Here I Am, and that Josh is dealing with in his film project, which is kind of the growing gap between, the real difference between the diaspora and Israelis, and the extent to which it's a bridgeable one. And it's kind of, it's such an important subject and kind of worth turning over in the way that he turns it over, I think.
Great. Yes, the Netanyahus. Yeah, Heidi's doing a great job putting all these book titles in the chat for us, and the chat will be saved, and everybody can save the chat as well themselves. Well, you're speaking to an audience of Judaica librarians and other supporters of Jewish literature. Like, do you have a message for us? Any words of wisdom, secret wishes, calls to action?
I will say that, I was amazed by the Jewish Book Council, by Jewish libraries, and the work that you do into promoting Jewish authors and how important that is. My book came out during the pandemic, and I thought, okay, no book tour, no nothing. But Jewish organizations around the country worked really hard to promote books in the United States and around the world. And I'm particularly, it was a wonderful window into what you do and what the Jewish Book Council does. And as a writer and as a reader, I'm really grateful for it. And then Robin at Addis Israel holds, I don't know if it's monthly, but regular book talks that are beautifully done and interesting and open our eyes to all sorts of new books.
So we'll keep up the good work.
Good.
Great. Any other?
We've been exponents of book groups for years and years. I've been in a book group for about 46 years.
Wow.
And I think that's the kind of thing that our kids picked up on in terms of seeing a love for books and love for meeting and talking about them. And to the extent that younger people can be encouraged to participate in book groups, secular, Jewish, whatever, it doesn't matter from that point of view. I think it's a great idea, and people should get behind that more.
Bert, so tell us a little bit about this book club that you've been a part of. Is it a couples? Is it a fiction, a nonfiction? What's the structure of this book club?
It's mostly couples. We are not in it as a couple because, well, I won't get into that, but she's in a women's book group, and I'm in a mixed group.
And we're also in a Jewish study group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Together, which has been going on for years and years. And, you know, we would go through the Torah, the Jewish text, and then we started traveling together to some of the places that we had read about, of course, starting with the trip to Israel. And then Eastern Europe and the Baltics and Turkey. And as we planned those trips, we'd study the Jewish history of those places and, you know, obviously reach out and look for Jewish locations and the opportunity to meet with living Jews in those places.
Sounds fabulous. Yeah, so Bert, tell us a little more about your book club, your mixed book club, you're calling it.
It's also mixed by religion. I think I'm the only one in it that's Jewish. We read everything. One person has to recommend the book as something they read, and that puts you on the spot. But that's the only rule. We meet about once every 6 weeks. And it's always drinks and then dinner and then discuss the book and then argue about the next book. Works.
That's great. But I do it. That is an important rule. You cannot pick a book for book club that nobody has read. Somebody has to vet it. That's a very important rule. Any other last comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. Josh or Jonathan or Sadie, any last comments on any topic? The last question or any topic?
I was just
She said.
I know.
Josh and Jonathan
I was very well
She
aware.
couldn't have been more explicit.
I was well aware of that, but I was going to try to tie together. I thought that what Sadie said about kind of the physical comforts of a Jewish library, and Josh's Friends Rosenzweig Club, that those two things seem to me connected very much. That kind of emerging from this pandemic, the kind of desire to be in physical spaces that connect us to people and to things is just such a natural, important imperative, and that because we've become so accustomed to digital existence and we can have a gala virtually, it feels like, you know, there's certain things that you could see washing away in the quest to do things more efficiently. And so it feels like I'm sure the pandemic has been a crisis for Jewish libraries, as they've been for lots of institutions, but it also feels like surely there's like an opportunity there, and then the absence just reinforces the need for the presence. And I would hope that there would be a way for libraries to emerge from this in a way that makes them feel even more necessary than ever.
Yeah. Now, Jonathan and Josh, you want to take your turn, or Sadie? No, you're good. Okay, I know the chat has been buzzing and I haven't been able to keep up with it, but if you have a question for our panel, we have a couple more minutes. Let me see if there were any, did I miss any questions? I thought I saw one. Oh, here we go. Were any of the three brothers writers in high school writing clubs or publications? And Sadie, are you involved in your high school writing club or high school publications?
I'll start. Yes, I guess. I write for our school newspaper, which I'm sure other people can later mention. I also write for and lead a climate publication that's sort of, we write about climate we try to go at it from a variety of lenses and try to, give people multiple ways to look at it, especially written for other high schoolers.
For other high schoolers. Is it, Sadie, someone else asked in the chat, is it intimidating to be part of this extremely literary successful family?
I think it is, yeah. There's definitely a lot to live up to as part of the younger generation, looking and seeing all of, your grandparents, parents, uncles, other family just be successful, great writers, and people in general. It's a lot to live up to, but it's also great to have those people that you can, talk to and learn from in your life too.
Anyone else want to answer the question about your early writing days?
Well, Jonathan and I were both editors of the same student newspaper that Sadie writes for, but it was a different era. Now, like when Sadie started this online publication, like has recruited writers from all over the world who are all students. It's like incredibly well edited. It looks like a professional publication. And whereas we were writing for the, 45 kids who would pick up the newspaper outside the bathroom of the high school, like Sadie does stuff and has a global audience. And it's obviously a dramatically different time to be growing up as somebody who wants to express ideas to the world. And it's been amazing to watch how Sadie has flourished and done that so incredibly.
Conversely, it was a lot easier to take risks when we were younger, because only 45 people would read it, and because there wasn't a global outreach, and because if anybody on planet Earth can find an issue of the Augur Bit from 1995, I will give them $10,000 for it. Dad is not included, and mom is not included here. Whereas, anything that a kid publishes now risks being on, attached to them for the rest of their lives. And it's really scary. And having two kids, I've seen the ways in which, technology democratizes and speeds up like self-expression, but it also makes the kind of risk-taking that's necessary to like discover who you are and want to share who you are much more difficult. And that's something that I worry about, and I'm not at all envious of. How to strike a balance of being in the sort of river of things without putting yourself at risk.
Yeah, it's incredibly challenging. I think any of us, and I'm in the same generation as you guys, like, I would not want to be a teenager today. I think we had it much, much easier. Josh, someone asked in the chat how your memory is, and if you keep up with all your tricks and things that you learned in the research of your book.
The sad truth is I was at one point a memory muscle man and could do these lift incredibly heavy barbells of information. And now I'm like a old schlub and I have not kept it up to the extent that I once did. I can no longer memorize a pack of playing cards in perfect order, which you can imagine has made me much less interesting to have around.
And 1,000 times cooler as well.
Thank you.
Another question came in on the chat, like looking ahead 10, 20 years, how do you see the reach of modern Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Hasidic Judaism, or maybe how do you want to see it? Josh, you shared a little bit based, on this new project you're doing in Boston, but kind of your dream or goal, or what you like to see the future of Judaism, right?
You should talk.
I'm happy to defer to my mom.
Okay.
But I mean, you could look at the demographics, like, Orthodoxy is growing in this country, and I think that will change the American Jewish landscape in all sorts of interesting ways. But then on the other hand, if you'd asked this question 60 years ago, people would have said the conservative movement is the future of American Judaism. It doesn't look that way today. So I don't know. I'm not ready to place any bets.
I'm not ready to place any bets either, but I do want to bet on the future. In that, when I had the opportunity to engage young Jews, I was amazed. I mean, I was blown away by the interest. As long as you allowed them to express themselves and to find themselves in the Jewish world, as long as you weren't putting up barriers and rules, and the institution that I ran, which had rock concerts and book talks, and also had services that were Reform and conservative and Orthodox, and you could be whatever kind of Jew you wanted to be. And much to my amazement, people wanted it. The first time we did a young professional Shabbat, after having done sort of the cool programming, and you're praying somebody shows up, we ran out of prayer books. 300 young Jews showed up. We could fill several sanctuaries, and did, on the high holidays, to people who weren't affiliated. I personally believe in the Jewish future, but we may have to shift our definitions, or certainly be more open.
Did you want to say something, Jonathan? Because there.
Well done.
I want to. One thing that I is worth saying in front of this group is about the future of American Judaism. I believe the future of American Jewry will be more literate in our own texts and traditions. Like, the three of us got as excellent an education as American society has to offer, bar none. And I think we probably received what by American Jewish standards would be considered a very good Jewish education. We didn't go to day school, we went to Hebrew school. But the truth of the matter is, and we've all devoted our lives in one degree or another to Judaism and Jewish texts. And we are a family that prides itself on being literate, and we are largely, in the scheme of things, in the historic scheme of things, relatively illiterate in our own Jewish heritage. And it's something that I feel strongly about in terms of correcting for my own children. Not a one of us actually speaks Hebrew fluently. And I don't think any of us actually ever looked at a page of Talmud, probably until we were, I think I was probably 17 the first time I ever saw a page of Talmud. And I think that juxtaposition of is very telling, and speaks to a huge opportunity for American Judaism, and one that obviously I'm interested in addressing.
Other final, we're just about out of time. Any other final comments from any of you? Everybody got their turn? I don't want anyone to complain at the next family dinner that somebody was hogging the Zoom, right? So
they'll complain anyway.
They'll complain anyway. Okay, so before we conclude, a little bird told me that I needed to wish that needed to wish and that AJL wanted to wish a happy birthday to Harry Chan from Opal's Media Flex, one of our sponsors. So happy birthday, Harry. I hope you're on. Any other, who's doing the closing announcements? But I do thank you all so much. Esther, Bert, Josh, Frank, Jonathan, Sadie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day on a Sunday to be with us. This was really incredible. And we were so honored to be the platform for your first ever family panel, and that you chose to do this with the Association of Jewish Libraries. We really are thrilled, and thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
just
you.
want to add thank you to all of you. And I am doing Daf Yomi for the first time, and I want to thank Josh for providing Safaria, which makes my life a lot easier trying to understand all of the Talmud, as he pointed out. I also want to say you are all welcome to stay with us. We're going to break off into breakout rooms and just talk amongst ourselves, but I don't want you to feel like you have to leave. So, but understand if you do. And it was wonderful having you here with us today. Thank you so much for your time. So,
Thank you.
Mom,
okay.
Dad, see you next year.
Thank you.
Your family reminds me a lot of mine, especially my son. So yes, Esther, you should get a medal for raising three young men of this quality. So I'm sure you had to put up with a lot, and I can understand what you probably listened to at the dinner table. So yeah, you're a handful.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Rachel, excellent job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, that was hard. It's hard, but you did a really excellent job with it. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I think that next on the agenda, Heidi, I think we're gonna break into breakout groups, or we're gonna break into breakout rooms.